Agatha Raisin and the Dubious Dinner Wine. A glamorous WI wine evening curdles into scandal when a pompous connoisseur collapses mid-toast, leaving one sharp-tongued hostess determined to clear her name and catch a killer. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Don't smudge the menus, Doris, Agatha snapped, snatching a card from Doris Simpson's fumbling hands. They took me hours to print. One can't simply dash off French terms as if they were shopping lists. Doris murmured something apologetic and backed away. Agatha didn't hear the words, but the tone suggested that Doris found the French perfectly readable. Agatha, unfortunately, did not. She glared at the neat stack of menus again, praying no one would realize how uncertain she felt about the accents she had sprinkled over them with reckless confidence. The WI hall looked lovely, though. She would give herself that. Candles flickered in borrowed brass holders. Tablecloths, begged from half the village, covered the trestle tables, and the centerpieces, even if Hodge had attempted to sit in them earlier, sparkled with silver ribbon. The effect was cozy, refined, and nothing like the rustic jumble certain women in the WI had predicted. A decisive click of polished shoes announced the arrival of Leonard Trent, the evening star. He was a man who believed himself Europe's gift to the English palate. His black suit strained slightly across the stomach, but his posture implied a lean, aristocratic figure. "Ladies," he said grandly, "tonight we travel. Bordeaux, Beaune, Burgundy, a continental symphony." Agatha preened at the phrase. Her event, elevated to symphonic levels. She cast a triumphant glance at the WI committee, who either missed it entirely or pretended to. Leonard settled behind a long table where the bottles waited like soldiers. "One must trust wine," he said, waving a corkscrew with theatrical flourish. "It speaks if one listens." Charles Frayth, leaning comfortably against a wall, murmured, "It's shouting for help, poor devil." Agatha ignored him. She needed this evening to go smoothly. Too many villagers assumed she was all talk when it came to refinement. Tonight she would show them. She'd had the menus printed on cream card, and the pudding, though store-bought, was arranged artfully on plates. Roy Silver swept in next, radiating London flamboyance. "Darling, what a scene! Very continental chic, if one squints." Agatha bristled. "It's exactly the look I intended." "Of course," Roy replied cheerfully, eyeing the decorations with affectionate mischief. "Very you." The guests began taking their seats. Gloria Burrows, all heels, perfume, and barely concealed ambition, glided to the front with the confidence of a duchess. She whispered something sharp to Leonard, who stiffened. Meanwhile, Martin Hargreaves, landlord of the Red Lion and proud defender of proper British drink, settled into his seat, looking as if he'd been forced into foreign captivity. Jeremy Vale, already a little pink about the cheeks, topped up his glass when he thought no one noticed. Agatha swept forward as Leonard lifted the first bottle. "Now, this," he announced, "is a classic. Soft tannins, round finish, a wine that knows its own worth." He plunged in the corkscrew, twisted dramatically, and pulled. The cork shot across the hall. A sharp vinegar tang floated out like a malicious spirit. The room fell silent. Leonard sniffed, recoiled, and turned accusingly toward Agatha. How were the cases stored? Agatha felt the heat rise from her collar to her hairline. "Stored? Properly? In my cupboard?" "A cupboard," Leonard repeated with pity. "Wine requires a stable environment. This is badly corked." A suppressed ripple of amusement passed along the tables. Roy leaned toward Charles. "She'll never forgive that bottle." Agatha's throat tightened. She wanted to hurl the offending wine at Leonard's smug face, but instead she lifted her chin. "Replace it with another. Your private stock, perhaps." Leonard, clearly enjoying himself, obliged. The next cork emerged without incident. He poured generously, and the WI murmured approval, already giddy from the drama. Agatha moved among the tables, checking the menus. Her confidence evaporated when she reached the line describing the main course. "Coq au." She hesitated. "Oh, never mind." Roy peered over her shoulder. "That's not how you say it, sweetie." "It's exactly how I say it," she snapped. Charles chuckled lazily. "Don't worry, Aggie. French is terribly overrated. Half of them don't speak it properly either." Agatha considered kicking him under the table, but suspected he'd only enjoy it. Nearby, Gloria was arguing again with Leonard. Words like investment, returns, and agreement drifted out. Gloria's smile, when she noticed Agatha watching, was as brittle as sugar glass. Martin the landlord glowered into his wineglass. When Leonard passed by and made a quip about pubs only serving plonk fit for road workers, Martin's knuckles whitened. Jeremy Vale, flushed and over-friendly, kept refilling his glass from whichever bottle was closest. "Lovely evening," he announced to anyone within 3 feet. "Marvellous fellow, Trent. Knows everything." Agatha began to regret inviting him. The first course ended in a blur of chatter and competitive wine swishing. Agatha tried to reclaim the tone of sophistication by reading the next menu item. The, vinaigrette provençale. "Sounds like cough syrup," someone muttered. Agatha nearly stabbed the salad, but gradually the atmosphere softened into something warm, lively, and almost worthy of a WI fundraising brochure. The candles flickered. People laughed. Even Martin stopped glowering. Agatha felt a twinge of triumph. This was the evening she had envisioned. Cultured, elegant, enviable. Agatha's heart lifted. If she could end the night with a truly memorable wine, the vinegar incident and the menu mishaps might be forgotten. She stepped forward, smiling as if she alone had orchestrated this miracle. Leonard lifted the deep ruby bottle with reverence. "Only a few will ever taste this vintage. A wine that rewards the patient and punishes the careless." Charles murmured, "Let's hope it's in a better mood than the first one." Roy stifled a snort. Agatha shot them both a warning look and directed her attention to the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "prepare for a truly continental experience." Her voice trembled with pride. Her evening, her triumph, her classy reputation rising from the ashes of Blue Nun rumours. In the warm glow of expectation, she failed to notice Gloria's tense stare, Martin's muttered comment about snobs, or Jeremy Vale's slightly glassy expression as he topped up again. Leonard poured the wine slowly, savouring the drama. The hall quieted. He lifted his glass, eyes half closed as if communing with the gods of Burgundy. Agatha inhaled with anticipation. She couldn't know, that this final flourish, this ambitious bottle meant to crown her evening, would soon drag her into yet another murder. "Wasted on simple palates, but I am generous," Leonard declared, lifting the ruby bottle as though presenting the crown jewels. The WI ladies leaned forward, half flattered, half offended. Agatha gripped her glass so tightly her knuckles blanched. If she smiled any harder, her face might crack. "Do get on with it," she muttered. He didn't hear her, or chose not to, and expanded his speech with another swirl of his hand. "A wine with stature, with lineage, with—" "Oh, pour it before it dies of boredom," Charles said lightly, earning a ripple of amusement from the tables. Leonard sniffed. "Some people lack refinement." Agatha ignored the barb. She would not let him ruin the one elegant moment of the evening. Around her, chairs scraped as Gloria Burrows wriggled herself into a seat closer to Leonard. The seating plan, so carefully arranged, had been redrawn twice thanks to Gloria's insistence that she had partnership matters to discuss with him. Agatha suspected the matters involved money, ambition, and an alarming amount of perfume. At last Leonard began pouring. The wine flowed smoothly, dark as velvet under the candlelight. Agatha raised her glass, hoping for redemption. Several WI members giggled as though participating in a forbidden rite, while others adopted pious expressions, as if drinking French wine required spiritual devotion. Under the tables, a faint rustle passed unnoticed until a startled shriek pierced the air. "Something touched my ankle!" cried Mrs. Trentham, jerking both feet onto her chair. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Agatha snapped, ducking down. A familiar pair of golden eyes shone back at her. "Hodge, how did you get in here?" Hodge gave her a reproachful blink and slinked away to investigate a dangling napkin. Chairs shifted, ankles were lifted defensively, and Doris Simpson muttered a breathless prayer. Leonard waited for the fuss to settle, clearly offended that a cat could interrupt his spotlight. "Shall we proceed?" he said, wounded dignity dripping from each word. He lifted his own glass with ceremonial solemnity. "To European excellence." "To the WI," someone offered. "To getting on with it," Charles added. Leonard drained his glass in one proud swallow. He placed it down with a flourish, then paused. His eyes wavered. His lips slackened. "Excuse me." His hand slid across the table. The glass tipped. A saucer skidded. His chair lurched sideways, and with a heavy thud he collapsed to the floor, limbs awkwardly splayed. Doris screamed. The hall erupted like hens startled by a fox. Someone shouted for a doctor, someone else for water. Mrs. Blocksby attempted calm, though even her face blanched. Agatha froze for one terrible second. Not now, she thought. Not at my dinner. Then instinct took over. "Call an ambulance," she ordered, "and don't let anyone trample him. Doris, stop fanning him with the menu. It's ridiculous." Doris continued, moving enough air to disturb the candles. A WI member crouched and began an enthusiastic but wildly inaccurate form of chest massage. "Stop," Agatha barked. "You'll snap something." "It's what they do on television," the woman protested. Before Agatha could reply, uniformed paramedics pushed through the chaos, followed closely by Bill Wong, who looked as if he had aged 10 years on the drive over. "Everyone step back, please," he said firmly. Agatha hovered at his shoulder. "Bill, it's just a collapse, isn't it? Stress, overacting, a touch of drink." "Agatha," he said without looking at her, "go sit down." "I most certainly will not. This is my—" "Sit," he repeated, with a tone even she obeyed. She perched on the edge of a chair, trembling with humiliation and a creeping sensation of dread. Guests muttered theories: heart attack, stroke, indigestion brought on by pretension. Jeremy Vale insisted he'd seen Leonard wobbling earlier. Gloria claimed he had complained of fatigue. Martin muttered something about divine justice for insulting honest pub wine. Under the table, Hodge reappeared, patting delicately at something beside Leonard's chair. Agatha watched absently as he dragged a fallen coaster into the open. A faint dusting of white powder clung to its rim. Bill, noticing the movement, crouched. "Mind if I take that?" he murmured to Hodge, who blinked serenely. Bill lifted the coaster, eyes narrowing at the residue. He slipped it into an evidence bag with a grimness Agatha recognized all too well. "What is it?" she demanded. "Not now. Oh, don't start that. I saw it first. Hodge saw it first. If he gets credit, Agatha—" He held her gaze. Something in his expression made her stomach twist. The paramedics lifted Leonard onto a stretcher. His face had taken a greyish cast Agatha hoped was merely poor lighting. The hall fell silent except for the clatter of medical equipment and whispered speculation. When the stretcher rolled out, Bill turned back to Agatha. "I need the seating plan, and a list of everyone who touched the wine." Agatha straightened as though bracing for a firing squad. "Why? You don't think—" "I don't know yet," he interrupted, "but I can't rule anything out." A fresh wave of mortification washed over her. Murder. At her dinner. She could already imagine the village gossip, Agatha Raisin's gourmet homicide. Mrs. Trentham would dine out on it for years. The remaining guests drifted away in small, scandalized groups. Chairs scraped, candles guttered, and Gloria trailed after the ambulance with an expression far too dramatic for Agatha's liking. Jeremy stumbled out, insisting someone call him in the morning because he was frightfully shaken. Martin returned to the Red Lion, muttering that he preferred a death-free drink. Bill supervised the clean-up with steady patience. When only Agatha remained, he approached with his notebook. "One more thing. Did you alter the seating at the last minute?" Agatha flushed. "Only because Gloria insisted on sitting near him. You know how she is." "Noted," Bill said. His tone was maddeningly neutral. "I would like to be kept informed," she said stiffly. "This is my event." "It's a police investigation, Agatha." "Then it's my duty to assist." He sighed. "Please try not to interfere." The hall door closed behind him before she could retort. Agatha stood alone in the dim hall, surrounded by discarded napkins and the faint smell of wine and panic. She felt anger rising, at Leonard for collapsing, at the village for staring, at Bill for treating her like a bystander. Worst of all, she felt the cold curl of fear that people would blame her for the fiasco. Hodge padded up and pressed against her leg, offering feline solidarity. She bent to stroke him, fingers shaking. "Well," she muttered, gathering her coat, "if there's been murder at my dinner, I'm damned well not letting anyone else solve it." At home hours later, Hodge padded across the kitchen in a sulk, offended by having been shut away from the festivities. Agatha stroked his back as the kettle clicked on, the familiar sound oddly steadying. She poured water into his bowl, then hers into a chipped mug, letting the warmth hold her together. The cottage was still, save for Hodge's rhythmic purring. Somewhere between humiliation and outrage, a spark of resolve ignited. "Tomorrow," she murmured, staring at nothing. "I start asking questions." Hodge yawned, stretched, and flicked his tail against her arm. It felt, if one was sentimental, like approval. By morning, she couldn't even buy tea without being tried in public. "Don't look at me like that, Mrs. Jessup," Agatha snapped, lifting her chin as the village shop fell abruptly silent. "I didn't pour the wretched wine down his throat." Mrs. Jessup, who had been whispering loudly enough for the frozen peas to hear, blinked with false innocence. "I only said it was bound to happen, mixing fancy foreign bottles with sensible village folk." "You implied I murdered him with Sauvignon," Agatha retorted. "I never said Sauvignon," Mrs. Jessup replied primly. "I said something fancy." The handful of shoppers pretended to browse while devouring every word. One man examined a tin of beans upside down. Another clutched a loaf like a life-preserver. News of Leonard Trent's death had raced through Castley with Olympic speed, and Agatha found herself the unwilling centrepiece of every conversation. Mrs. Bloxby slipped in beside her, warm and steady as always. "People mean well, Mrs. Raisin," she murmured. "They're simply concerned." Agatha huffed. "About what? That I dared to host a civilized dinner? He could have collapsed anywhere." A nearby pensioner whispered, "Poisoned right at her table, they say." Agatha whirled. "He was not poisoned at my table. The police haven't confirmed anything." But they had confirmed something, at least to her. Bill's expression last night still haunted her, far more than she cared to admit. She marched to the counter. "2 packets of tea, please," she said. "The good kind, the one that doesn't taste like dishwater." The shopkeeper handed them over with the pitying air of a man serving someone headed to the gallows. "Terrible business, Mrs. Raisin. People talking all over. Some say it's that continental wine. Doesn't agree with English stomachs." Agatha paid with stiff dignity. If one more person blamed the wine, she might use a tin of custard as a projectile. Outside the shop, Mrs. Bloxby touched her elbow. "Would you come to the W.I. Hall? There's a little meeting." "Is it about my murder dinner?" Agatha asked bitterly. Mrs. Bloxby winced at the phrasing, which was answer enough. The hall looked worse in daylight. Decorations sagged, the tablecloths resembled battle flags, and a lingering smell of gravy clung to the air. Agatha stepped inside, bracing herself. Doris Simpson rushed toward her. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, we're all so sorry." "For what?" Agatha asked. "I didn't kill him." Doris faltered. No, of course not. We're just sorry. About everything." The W.I. committee sat in a semicircle like a jury. Gloria Burrows dabbed her eyes with a tissue that matched her dress. Martin Hargreaves lurked by the door, clearly unwilling to be here but determined to defend the honour of pubs everywhere. Bill Wong stood beside the trestle table, calm but undeniably weary. When he saw Agatha, he gave a polite nod. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't have a choice," she replied. "People keep accusing me before breakfast." He gestured for her to sit. "I'll be brief. Mr. Trent died during the night. Toxicology suggests he was poisoned. The substance appears to have been introduced into his glass shortly before he drank." A collective gasp rose from the W.I., followed by anxious murmuring. Someone whispered, "I knew that wine was trouble." Bill continued, unflinching. There was no contamination in the bottle, only his glass. Agatha felt the hall tilt slightly. So someone leaned over his place? "It's possible." Bill's tone stayed cautious. "We are speaking to everyone who had access to the table." Doris wrung her hands. Oh dear. I carried the bread basket and the cheese, but I never went near his glass. I would remember. I think." A stern W.I. member pushed up her spectacles. "All this fuss over expensive wine. It's immoral. If people drank proper British drinks—" Martin cut her off. "Thank you. Some of us run establishments serving proper drinks." Gloria sniffed loudly. "I told Leonard he was reckless with his business dealings, but he never listened. Men never do." Agatha eyed her sharply. "You had a rather animated conversation with him." "I merely wanted him to honour our investment agreement," Gloria said, smoothing her skirt with unnecessary vigour. "He made me look a fool." "That doesn't take much," muttered a W.I. member, earning a gasp. Bill raised a hand. "Please, let's stay on topic." Another woman spoke up. "I heard Martin muttering when Leonard talked about buying the Red Lion." Martin straightened. "I mutter at everything. Doesn't mean I'm a murderer." Fliss Pemberton, the vicar's niece, sat hunched at the end of the table. She looked exhausted, dark shadows under her eyes. Whenever someone mentioned finances, she flinched. Agatha noticed. Agatha always noticed. Bill concluded his briefing, then turned to her privately. "Agatha, please, and I really mean this, do not interfere." She folded her arms. "I don't interfere, I assist." "No, you interfere. I am a concerned citizen. You are a hazard with lipstick." Agatha opened her mouth indignantly, but Mrs. Blocksby stepped between them with gentle diplomacy. "Bill means well," she said softly. "He's simply under pressure." "He's not the only one," Agatha snapped. "My reputation is dangling by a thread." "And yet," Mrs. Blocksby murmured, "the truth will come out more easily if everyone stays calm." Calm was not a word commonly associated with Agatha Raisin. That evening, she sat at home with her notebook spread across the kitchen table. Hodge prowled in circles until she placed his bowl precisely where he preferred it, 2 inches from the radiator and within swatting distance of her pen. Charles lounged in the armchair, flipping through a magazine he clearly wasn't reading. "I see your dinner party is the talk of the village," he remarked. "Shut up," Agatha said without heat. "Everyone's acting as if I served cyanide on toast." "Did you?" "Charles," he grinned. "Well, someone did something, and knowing this village, it was probably motivated by money, jealousy, pride, or sheer boredom." Agatha scrawled 3 names on her notepad: Gloria, Martin, Fliss. They all had reason to hate him, and opportunity. Charles raised an eyebrow. "Bill told you to stay out of it." "Exactly," Agatha said, "so I must dive in immediately." He laughed, settling deeper into the chair. "Where will you start?" "Leonard's shop in Mercester," she replied. "People hide their true selves in their workplaces, and I intend to look under every stone." Hodge jumped into her lap, pawing at the notebook as if adding his own suspects, his tail wrapped possessively across the page. Agatha stroked him, feeling her resolve harden. "If Bill thinks I'm sitting quietly while he blunders about, he's mad. I'll solve this myself." Charles's voice floated lazily across the room. "Just don't get arrested before lunch." She ignored him. She had a murder to solve, a village to silence, and a reputation to rescue. Hodge stretched, curling against her stomach, purring as if approving her plan, or simply demanding warmth. Either way, it felt like encouragement. "I am not clinging," Agatha insisted, though she was gripping Charles's arm with enough force to leave indentations. "I simply don't want to arrive looking like a woman abandoned beside a motorway." Charles, leaning against his convertible with maddening serenity, said, "You'll look as you always do, formidable and very slightly alarming." Agatha bristled. "I need moral support." "You need my car," he said. "Let's not dress it up." She released his arm with a huff and climbed into the passenger seat. Her coat, fashionable, tight, and wholly unsuited for sitting, bunched unpleasantly. "We're going to Mercester, not the Arctic. Why is it suddenly so cold?" "It isn't cold," Charles replied, starting the engine. "Your coat just doesn't bend." She glared at him, but he only smiled, the lazy, aristocratic smile that made her want to smack him and kiss him in equal measure. The drive to Mercester took them past hedgerows and quiet lanes. Agatha's mind churned. Leonard Trent had been many things: pompous, vain, deeply irritating, but murder still felt out of proportion to his sins, unless, of course, he had annoyed someone wealthier, angrier, or more foolish than herself. In Carsley, that was practically anyone. Charles pulled up outside Trent's Fine Wines, a narrow shop squeezed between a florist and a solicitor's office. Bright winter light streamed through its plate-glass windows, reflecting off rows of bottles arranged with almost religious reverence. Posters in gold lettering proclaimed exclusive investment opportunities and sell yourself into wealth. Agatha sniffed. "Investment opportunities, my foot. Looks like a shrine to overcharging." Charles held the door for her. "Try to be charming." "I am charming," she said, stepping inside. "When warranted." The shop smelled of cork, dust, and optimism. Behind the counter stood Nadia, the assistant, a thin young woman with tense shoulders and eyes that darted like trapped birds. When she saw Agatha, her posture eased in what looked alarmingly like relief. "Mrs. Raisin," Nadia said quietly, "I heard what happened. Terrible business. Truly terrible." Agatha adopted a solemn expression, though she suspected the girl was secretly glad her pompous employer was no longer breathing. "We're all shocked," she said. "A real tragedy." Charles coughed delicately. "A tragedy with financial undertones, possibly." Nadia turned pale. "Is this about the accounts? Because I never touched anything. I told Mr. Trent those numbers didn't make sense, but he said I wasn't to question. Agatha leaned forward with renewed interest. What didn't make sense? Clients paying for cases that didn't exist yet, Nadia whispered. Bottles supposedly stored off-site. People handing over their savings because he promised massive returns. He said it was all above board, but her voice trailed off as someone passed outside the shop. She flinched. Agatha filed the information away. We'd like to see Mr. Trent's office. Nadia hesitated. The police were here this morning. They didn't take everything. Excellent, Agatha said. Lead the way. The back office was small and cluttered, its gloom enhanced by a flickering desk lamp. Papers lay in unruly piles. A ledger sat open, covered in Mr. Trent's untidy scrawl. A locked cabinet stood against the wall, and Nadia hurried to position herself between it and Agatha. That's just storage, Nadia said quickly. Then you won't mind opening it, Agatha replied sweetly. I don't have the key. Convenient, Charles murmured. Agatha examined the desk. A notebook lay open, filled with cryptic initials beside large numbers. Clients? She asked. Nadia nodded. Investors. He liked to sound important. Half of them barely knew what they'd bought. Agatha traced one entry. SERP. What's this? Nadia looked uncomfortable. St. Eustace Restoration Partnership. Some church fund. Mr. Trent said it would make them all look clever. A faint bell rang in Agatha's memory. The vicar's niece mentioned something about investments. Charles raised an eyebrow. Church money? With Trent? Brave souls. Agatha straightened. Or gullible ones. And gullible people get angry when they realize they've been played. Before she could press further, the door chimed and a tall, narrow man entered, dressed in an overcoat that tried too hard to look expensive. Ah, he said, spotting Agatha. The famous hostess. Agatha stiffened. And you are? Kemp, Evesham Wines. Terrible news about Leonard. Tragic. He didn't look remotely grief-stricken. In fact, he examined the shop with the satisfied air of a man arriving early at an estate sale. I came to offer condolences, Kemp continued, and perhaps clarify a few matters. Leonard was a brilliant man, misguided, yes, but brilliant. Agatha folded her arms. Misguided how? Oh, he mixed with the wrong people, Kemp said with theatrical sadness. Investors who demanded results before he could deliver them. He was on the verge of going to the police, you know. Nadia blinked. He was? Absolutely, Kemp said. He'd discovered some partners in a questionable import chain, wanted out before it got messy. Agatha considered this. If Kemp was telling the truth, Leonard had enemies outside Carsley, genuine criminals, not merely irritated WI members. But Kemp's sincerity had the transparency of cling film. What partners? She asked. Kemp spread his hands. Professional discretion, but if someone wanted to silence him, well... He let the implication hang like a poorly aged cheese. Charles leaned close to Agatha. He's enjoying this too much. Agreed, she muttered. Kemp made a final circuit of the shop, leaving behind the faint scent of opportunism, then departed with a solemn nod that fooled no one. Agatha turned to Nadia. Do you believe any of that? Nadia hesitated. Leonard did have meetings with people I'd never met, but he also liked to exaggerate his importance. A mixed vintage, Charles said. A hint of fraud, a note of ego. And a heavy finish of nonsense, Agatha added. She wandered the shop again, letting her eyes drift over the posters promising wealth through wine. It was all too cosy, too curated, a facade designed to impress the insecure. Precisely the sort of setup that would attract people like Gloria, Martin, or the vicar's niece. At the doorway, she paused. Nadia, did Leonard argue recently with someone from a village? Yes, Nadia said after a moment. A pushy woman, middle-aged, expensive handbag. She wanted her money back and wasn't leaving without it. Agatha felt a shiver of recognition. Gloria Burrows had an expensive handbag and pushiness in abundance. That's helpful, Agatha said. If you remember anything else. I'll tell the police, Nadia said, not you. Agatha blinked at the boldness. Nadia flushed. I'm sorry, Mrs. Raisin, but I don't want to get in trouble. Agatha respected the honesty, even if it annoyed her. She and Charles stepped back out onto the pavement. Traffic hissed past, and the cold, bright air hit Agatha's too-tight coat like a reprimand. Well, Charles asked, unlocking the car. Well, Agatha said, Leonard was either a small-time fraud or a misunderstood genius. Either way, plenty of people would have loved to shut him up. You included, Charles teased. She shot him a glare. I don't kill people for mispronouncing things. You kill them internally, he said. She ignored him and climbed in. As they drove back toward Carsley, a faint mist gathered along the edges of the fields, softening the hedgerows. Agatha's thoughts churned with motives. Church money, pub money, Gloria's vanity, Fliss's panic, Martin's pride. Murder, she realized, wasn't always born of hatred. Sometimes it sprang from humiliation or desperation, feelings she understood painfully well. Back home she fed Hodge his supper, listening to the steady crunch of kibble. His presence grounded her more than she would ever admit. She sat beside him, coat unbuttoned at last, feeling the slow thump of her own pulse quieten. "Well, Hodge," she murmured, "the plot thickens faster than gravy at a WI luncheon." Hodge stretched luxuriously, then nudged her hand as if urging her to continue. And she would, tomorrow. "Of course she has climbing roses," Agatha muttered, marching up Gloria Burrows's freshly laid gravel drive. "Women like her always do. Roses, catalogues, and husbands who mysteriously never appear." The cottage sat prettily on the edge of Carsley, every pot arranged with military precision, every window pane shining as if buffed hourly. Agatha already felt irritated. Perfect houses tended to hide imperfect lives, and Gloria's life looked aggressively curated. She jabbed the doorbell. Gloria opened it at once, dressed in a soft pink ensemble that made her seem like an iced confection. Her face crumpled theatrically. "Agatha, oh my dear, come in. I'm absolutely shattered by the news." "You look radiant for a shattered woman," Agatha said, stepping inside. Gloria allowed the insult to glide past, leading her to a sitting room bursting with glossy magazines and faux antique furniture. "Would you like tea? I've just been going through these notes from the tasting trip I arranged last spring. Leonard was such a guide, so full of expertise." Agatha eyed the pile. "Yes, I'm sure every vineyard trembled at his wisdom." Gloria pressed a hand to her heart. "You must understand, he was more than a merchant. He raised the tone of things, like your dinner, such an elegant idea." Agatha bristled. "It was perfectly elegant until he decided to collapse." Gloria sighed heavily. "Tragic, but you organized it beautifully, truly. Even if the wine service was, well," Agatha's eyes narrowed. "Was what?" "Oh, nothing," Gloria said brightly. "Only that making sure bottles breathe is essential, but we can't all be connoisseurs." Agatha wished, briefly and passionately, that she had brought a frying pan. She sat down, crossing her legs with imperious precision. "Gloria, I'm here because several WI members heard you arguing with Leonard before the dinner." Gloria gave a delicate, trembling laugh. "Oh, that! A minor misunderstanding. I simply asked about the returns on my investments. Leonard could be terribly forgetful with paperwork. Men always are." Agatha leaned forward. "Forgetful or evasive?" Gloria's smile thinned. "He owed me money. That is no secret. But I would hardly murder a man over a late payment." "I didn't say you did." "You implied." "I suggested." "Well," Gloria huffed, "if one is made to look a fool, certain emotions arise." "Anger?" Agatha asked. "Outrage," Gloria corrected. "I am a woman of standing." Agatha bit her tongue before pointing out that standing was precarious when built on installment payments. She scanned the room again, noting the expensive vase, the brand-new stereo, and, on the mantel, a framed picture of a man who looked as though he'd never set foot in the Cotswolds. "Your husband away again?" "Yes," Gloria said, far too quickly. "Business trips, very important ones." Agatha rose. "Shall we have a look at your garden? I want to see those roses you're so proud of." Gloria hesitated, but forced a gracious smile. "Of course, they're newly planted. Leonard advised me on them, actually." They stepped out to a pristine shed beside a neatly bordered flower bed. Agatha's eyes instantly locked onto a plastic container on the shelf, half empty, starkly labelled "Weed Killer." "My," Agatha said lightly, "you've been busy." Gloria followed her gaze. "Oh, that! Leonard told me it was the best for establishing new beds. Something about controlling root competition." Agatha tapped the container. "Freshly used." Gloria's smile flickered. Gardeners must garden. Inside the shed, tools hung with unnatural neatness. Not a speck of soil dared appear. Agatha's suspicion sharpened. "Tell me, Gloria, where were you during the dessert service?" Arranging flowers on the tables, she said quickly. Everyone saw me. I wasn't anywhere near Leonard. And the wine? I don't touch wine at events, it stains. Agatha considered this. As alibis went, vanity could be shockingly reliable. They returned indoors, where Gloria poured tea with dramatic trembling in her wrists. It's all been such a shock, I hardly slept. Grief often looks like insomnia, Agatha said, sipping. Or guilt. Gloria's cup clattered. How dare you? You argued, you invested heavily, and you were seen threatening him. I merely wanted my money, Gloria cried. He promised returns. He said my husband would be impressed. So it was pride? Agatha asked. It was dignity, Gloria insisted. Their verbal tango continued as Gloria launched into a monologue on wine notes, tannins, and subtle finishes. Agatha countered with vague claims about enjoying a good Burgundy, praying Charles never heard of it, or he'd tease her forever. Gloria smirked. Oh, Agatha, darling, Burgundy isn't a grape. Agatha stiffened. I know that. Gloria tilted her head. Do you? Agatha muttered something about wine being wasted on snobs. While Gloria prattled on, a stack of papers on a side table caught Agatha's eye. Unpaid bills peeked from beneath a glossy magazine, overdue notices from catalogues, homeware companies, and, interestingly, a credit firm. A locked desk drawer below them sat slightly ajar, as though hastily shut. Oh dear, Agatha said sweetly, pointing. Looks like someone's finances are less elegant than their wardrobe. Gloria flushed deep crimson. Those are private. Not to the people you owe, Agatha replied. Did Leonard know? Gloria's silence spoke clearly. Agatha slipped her notebook from her bag. Let's be frank. Leonard knew you were desperate. Desperate people make rash choices. Gloria stood abruptly. Get out of my house. Gladly, Agatha said, rising with regal slowness. Your decor is giving me hives. She walked toward the door, enjoying the faint hiss Gloria made, like a furious tea kettle. Outside, the gravel crunched under her heels, sounding wonderfully decisive. Charles's convertible rolled up at that exact moment. He leaned out the window, eyebrows high. Still alive, I see. Barely, Agatha muttered. If she offers me one more tasting note, I'll drown her in her own teapot. Charles chuckled. Find anything useful? Weed killer, debt, pride, enough motive to fuel a Shakespeare play. But opportunity? Charles asked. She was fluttering around the tables, wasn't she? True, Agatha admitted. She thinks fussing over flowers gives her an alibi. And does it? Agatha snapped off a rose petal and examined it. It gives her vanity, not innocence. Charles glanced past her at the immaculate cottage. She's hiding something. Oh, she's hiding many things, Agatha said. Mostly bills. They drove away, Agatha's irritation simmering like a badly tended stew. Gloria had the temperament for melodrama, that much was certain. But planting weed killer as poison required more cunning than Agatha credited her with. Still, she made a delightfully showy suspect. They turned into Carsley, passing the vicarage. The thought struck Agatha with an unpleasant jolt. Fliss, the vicar's exhausted niece, had good reason to fear exposure too. Church money gone astray made for deadly embarrassment. Drop me at home, Agatha said. I need to change before confronting the vicarage. You're going now? Charles asked. Before Mrs. Bloxby remembers to be polite and talks me out of it. Back at her cottage, Hodge greeted her with a pointed meow that suggested she was late. She bent to stroke him, her annoyance easing slightly. You'd make a better detective than half this village, she murmured. At least you know when someone's lying. Hodge headbutted her knee, then strutted toward his food bowl, demanding tribute. Agatha followed, grabbing her notebook. She flipped to her suspect list and scribbled Gloria's name with a heavy underline. Pride, debts, weed killer, all wrapped in pink satin and delusion. She sighed. Fine, Hodge. Onward to the next liar. Hodge stretched luxuriously, his tail curling like punctuation at the end of her resolve. You'd better not tell me to tread gently, Agatha announced as Mrs. Bloxby opened the vicarage door, because I absolutely refuse. Mrs. Bloxby gave her a serene smile, which was infuriating in its own way. Do come in, Mrs. Raisin. I've put the kettle on. Kettle? I'm here about fraud, Agatha said, sweeping past her into the slightly shabby drawing-room. The armchairs sagged amiably, and the fire needed encouragement. A tray of neatly arranged teacups sat on the low table, radiating good intentions. Agatha did not sit. She planted herself in the centre of the room like an outraged general. "Is it true," she began, "that church money has vanished into Leonard Trent's greasy hands?" Mrs. Blocksby folded her own hands primly. "Not vanished, Mrs. Raisin. It has merely not yet returned." "That's the same thing," Agatha snapped, "only with better manners." Before Mrs. Blocksby could respond, the door opened and Fliss Pemberton entered, carrying a ledger so tightly clutched it might have been a life raft. She was pale, almost translucent, with nervous eyes and the defeated posture of someone who has misplaced something priceless and personal. "I've brought the accounts," Fliss murmured. Agatha pounced. "Good. Explain why St. Eustace's roof is being bankrolled by fraudulent wine schemes." Mrs. Blocksby winced. "Perhaps we can avoid the word fraudulent until we're certain." "We're certain," Agatha said, snatching the ledger from Fliss. "The man ran investment schemes with all the integrity of a used car dealer." Fliss's voice trembled. "He told me it was safe. He said wine was stable, that profits were guaranteed, and he said the church would look modern." "Modern?" Agatha barked. "Church roofs leak regardless of modernity." Mrs. Blocksby touched Fliss's shoulder. "Show her the notes, dear." Fliss reluctantly opened the ledger. Rows of figures ran neatly for a few months, then disintegrated into penciled additions, crossed-out attempts at rebalancing, and several ominous gaps. Agatha scanned the mess, lips thinning. "You were in trouble months ago," Agatha said. Fliss nodded miserably. "I kept waiting for the profits. Leonard assured me the delays were normal." "When exactly?" Fliss pointed to a penciled date near the margin. "He wrote to me again last week. Here." Agatha read the letter. Leonard's tone was firm, even patronizing, warning of pressure from other investors and the need for Fliss to be prompt and transparent. Agatha lowered the page. "He was threatening you. Why didn't you tell anyone?" Fliss flinched. "I didn't want to worry Aunt Margaret." Mrs. Blocksby's expression softened into sorrow. Fliss should never have dealt with him alone. "You recommended him," Agatha said. Mrs. Blocksby sighed. "I suggested he was knowledgeable about wine. I did not recommend speculative business ventures." "Same difference," Agatha muttered. Fliss swallowed hard. "I only meant to help the church. I thought, if the investments grew, we could repair the roof and add heating to the hall. Children wouldn't shiver during winter services." Agatha felt a flicker of pity, quickly suppressed. "Did Leonard threaten to expose you as incompetent?" Fliss's reaction was sharp and immediate. She recoiled. "I said no such thing." "You didn't have to," Agatha replied. "It's written all over your face." Mrs. Blocksby stepped in swiftly. "That's quite enough, Mrs. Raisin." Agatha drew herself up. "I'm simply following the clues." "You are trampling them," Mrs. Blocksby said gently but firmly, "and trampling my niece's nerves along with them." Agatha opened her mouth for a retort, but Mrs. Blocksby's steady gaze silenced her. For a moment, she felt like a chastened child. A knock sounded at the door. Fliss bolted upright, relief and fear warring on her face. Mrs. Blocksby excused herself and returned with Mrs. Jessup from the WI, holding a crocheted bag stuffed with pamphlets. "Terribly sorry to intrude," Mrs. Jessup said briskly. "I simply needed to ask whether the vicar would approve flyers for next month's fete." "We're rather in the middle of something," Agatha said. Mrs. Jessup ignored her. "Oh, and I forgot to mention, I heard Leonard and that Red Lion landlord having a right barney outside the village hall the night of the dinner. Terrible shouting. Something about business practices and respect." Agatha's head snapped up. "Martin? He didn't tell me that." "Well, one wouldn't tell you everything," Mrs. Jessup said, giving Agatha a look suggesting that no one ever should. "Anyway, mustache." Fliss sagged into her chair as the door closed. Mrs. Blocksby resumed her place beside her niece, pouring 2 cups of restorative tea. Agatha paced. "So Leonard threatened you, Martin yelled at him, Gloria fought with him, and Jeremy Vale was already 3 glasses in before dessert. This is turning into a circus." Mrs. Blocksby dabbed her teacup with a napkin. "Perhaps we should focus on kindness." "Kindness doesn't solve murders," Agatha said. "Nor does belligerence," Mrs. Blocksby replied, in the same tone one might use on a fractious terrier. Agatha spun toward the ledger again. The phrase St. Eustace Restoration Partnership leapt out, the same words from Leonard's framed flyer at the wine shop. "Fliss, did Leonard give you documents to sign?" Just these forms, Fliss said, handing over a slim file. Agatha skimmed them, growing more outraged each second. This is nonsense. Vague promises, undefined terms, no mention of risk. He conned you. Fliss whispered, I'm so ashamed. Mrs. Blocksby squeezed her hand. We will sort this out. Agatha threw her hands up. Fine. I'll help you sort it out, but I need honesty. Did Leonard threaten to tell the vicar? To expose you publicly? Fliss's silence was answer enough. Mrs. Blocksby stood, her voice warm but firm. That's enough questions for today, Mrs. Raisin. You can't hide her from suspicion, Agatha argued. She had the motive. Money, humiliation, fear of exposure. Fliss did not kill anyone, Mrs. Blocksby said, a note of iron beneath her gentleness. She could have panicked, Agatha insisted. People do terrible things when cornered. And you, Mrs. Blocksby said softly, are allowing your pride to cloud your judgment. Agatha recoiled as though slapped. My pride? Mrs. Blocksby nodded kindly. This whole business began at your dinner. You feel responsible. You want answers quickly, so you're pushing harder than you should. Agatha opened her mouth, closed it, then snapped. I'm not pushing, I'm investigating. Mrs. Blocksby's mild expression held steady. Then investigate with compassion. Agatha grabbed her handbag. Compassion won't catch a murderer. Mrs. Blocksby smiled sadly. Neither will storming through the village like an avenging angel. Agatha stalked to the door, deeply offended. Being told she was prideful by the kindest woman in Castley was an insult she didn't quite know how to digest. Outside, the late afternoon light softened the vicarage garden. It annoyed her. She didn't want softness. She wanted clarity, and preferably someone to shout at who deserved it. Martin from the Red Lion suddenly seemed a promising candidate. She marched down the path, muttering, "Threatened by Leonard, were you?" shouting outside the hall, and conveniently silent when I asked. As she neared the gate, she paused to jot a note. Martin. Confrontation before dinner. Possible motive. She hesitated, then added under Fliss's name, fear, shame, and opportunity. Agatha snapped her notebook shut. Mrs. Blocksby's comments gnawed at her, but she pushed them aside. Pride had nothing to do with this. She was being thorough, determined, efficient. She was also furious, which helped. Back at her cottage, Hodge greeted her with a pointed chirrup, weaving between her legs. Agatha scooped him up despite his token wriggle. At least you don't accuse me of pride, she told him. Hodge flicked his tail, unimpressed. She set him down and filled his bowl, the kettle sighing to life behind her. As she waited for it to boil, she leaned heavily against the counter, exhaling. Well, Hodge, she murmured, onward to the pub. Hodge stretched luxuriously, toes splayed, as if blessing her questionable plan. I am not here for a drink, Agatha declared as she pushed open the Red Lion's door. I am here for information. Charles, drifting behind her with lazy amusement, murmured, You say that now. The pub was pleasantly bustling, the early evening crowd generating a comfortable hum of gossip, laughter, and the unmistakable aroma of chips. Several villagers glanced up at her entrance, some curious, some wary, a few openly delighted at the prospect of drama. Martin Hargreaves, the landlord, stood polishing a glass with the gravity of a surgeon preparing for theatre. When he saw Agatha, his shoulders tightened. Evening, Mrs. Raisin. Martin, Agatha said, marching up to the bar. We need to talk. About the dinner? He asked politely, which somehow made it worse. Yes, about the dinner, Agatha snapped. Unless you've forgotten the part where a man died. Martin set down the glass. I haven't forgotten anything. Charles leaned on the bar, smiling. She's doing her investigative walk, Agatha elbowed him. I am not walking. I am interrogating. Martin sighed. What do you want to know? For a start, Agatha said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial growl, why you didn't tell me you had a blazing row with Leonard before the dinner. A ripple of interest spread through nearby drinkers. Martin flushed. It wasn't blazing. A WI member described it as a proper Barney, Agatha countered. And she didn't specify the decibel level, so I'm forced to assume the worst. Martin's jaw tightened. He insulted my wine list, said Castley deserved better than pub plonk. A man at a nearby table snorted. He weren't wrong. Martin shot him a glare before continuing. Then he said he might buy the Red Lion, turn it into a bar, a proper bar. Agatha blinked. A bar is a bar. He meant one of those fancy modern places, Martin said bitterly. Chrome stools, tiny plates, the works. Called me an old-fashioned landlord stuck in my ways. Agatha felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. Outrageous, Charles said. To be fair, you are old-fashioned. Agatha stamped on his foot. Martin folded his arms. So yes, I told him he'd regret treating me like an idiot. Didn't mean I'd murder him. People say dramatic things, Agatha agreed, and especially when pushed. Or when drunk, someone muttered nearby. Agatha spun. Who said that? A barmaid raised her hand timidly. Sorry, Mrs. Raisin. I just meant Leonard had already had 2 glasses before dessert. He was getting loud. Loud and poisoned are quite different, Agatha said, though in his case, both were inconvenient. Martin cleared his throat. Look, some of the wine for your dinner did come through my supplier. I sent it over as a goodwill gesture. Goodwill? Agatha asked. Or an attempt to prove Leonard wrong? A bit of both, Martin admitted. But the special reserve bottle, the one he opened with that ridiculous flourish, that didn't come from me. Agatha paused. It didn't? No, he brought it himself, guarded it too, wouldn't let anyone else touch it. Charles raised a brow. That's interesting. Agatha scribbled a note. So, we can rule out your cellar tampering with his special bottle. Martin bristled. Cellar tampering. Well, Agatha said, you do keep rat poison down there. Martin stared at her. Of course I keep rat poison down there. It's a pub. Rats like pubs. Agatha sauntered toward the cellar door. May I? No, Martin said firmly. You may not. She ignored this and peered into the dim stairwell anyway, spotting a bright blue container perched on a shelf. Aha. Aha what? Martin demanded. Rat poison, Agatha said smugly. A clue. It's not a clue, Martin exploded. It's common sense. The barmaid coughed gently. Mrs. Raisin, you might want to know Fliss from the vicarage was serving coffee that night. I saw her weaving through the tables. She passed right behind Mr. Trent's chair. Agatha's head snapped round. Behind his chair? Yes, the barmaid said. Twice, I think. She looked nervous. Charles murmured, Everyone looks nervous around Agatha. Agatha ignored him. This is important. Could she have added something to his glass? Martin shook his head. Leonard was holding his glass most of the time. He was doing that thing where he boasted about legs and bouquet. Agatha groaned. Men who know nothing always boast about legs and bouquet. Charles cleared his throat. Not all men. Agatha levelled a look at him. All men. She returned to her list. Tell me, Martin, did Jeremy Vale behave oddly that evening? Martin rubbed his chin. He slipped outside for a phone call, looked rattled when he came back. Rattled how? Like someone had told him bad news, Martin said, or good news he couldn't afford. Agatha's mind whirred. Another financial motive. Spectacular. Martin frowned. Mrs. Raisin, you're not going to drag my pub into a major inquiry, are you? It's already in one, Agatha said cheerfully. But don't worry, you probably didn't do it. Probably, Agatha offered a vague, comforting pat to his arm. Statistically speaking, landlords rarely poison wine merchants. That's not comforting, Martin said. A customer waved at the bar, shouting, 2 pints and a white wine with ice. Agatha recoiled. White wine with ice? Who are these people? Martin grinned despite himself. Tourists. Agatha shuddered. Barbaric. She leaned closer. Between us, your ordinary claret is better than the cloudy horror Leonard served. Don't tell anyone I said that. Your secret's safe, Martin said, beaming. Charles nudged her. Look at you, a budding pub critic. Oh, shut up, Agatha said without malice. She gathered her notes. Martin, if you remember anything odd, anything petty, anything stupid Leonard might have done, you call me. I'll call Bill, Martin replied. Call me, Agatha said. Bill is allergic to initiative. As they left the bar, several villagers whispered behind their hands. Agatha lifted her chin. Nothing fueled her resolve like being gossiped about. Outside, she pulled out her mobile, the old brick-like model she refused to replace, and dialed Bill. He answered after 3 rings. Agatha, he said wearily. What now? She launched into a brisk summary. Martin's quarrel, the rat poison, Fliss slipping behind Leonard's chair, Jeremy's mysterious phone call, and her own conclusion that the case hinged on identifying who had managed to get close to Leonard's glass. Bill listened in polite silence, which infuriated her. "Well?" she demanded. "Well what?" Bill replied. "Aren't you impressed?" "It's helpful," he admitted, "but please don't harass people." "I don't harass," Agatha said. "I interview." "You harass," Bill said, "gently, but still." Agatha made an indignant noise. "Fine. Do you want information or not?" "I always appreciate information," Bill said calmly. "Just don't start a riot." "Me?" Agatha exclaimed. "I'm the soul of diplomacy." Bill hung up before laughing became audible. Agatha snapped her phone shut. "He doesn't deserve me." Charles smirked. "Few men do." "Few men try," Agatha retorted. They walked back toward her cottage, Agatha mentally rearranging the dinner seating. Someone had tampered with Leonard's glass. Someone with motive, opportunity, and nerve. As she visualized each table, each chair, each plate, a thought began to form, a reconstruction. If she could recreate the positions, the routes people walked, the moments glasses were left unattended, she could isolate who had the chance. "Charles," she said slowly, "I think we need to recreate the dinner." "Oh, good," he said. "I love amateur theatre." "This is not theatre," Agatha snapped. "It's forensic reenactment." "Same thing," Charles murmured. At her doorstep she paused. Hodge appeared in the window, tail flicking with judgment. Agatha sighed. All right, I'm coming." Inside, Hodge greeted her with a soft, accusing chirrup, as if she had been gone for days rather than an hour. She scooped him up, nuzzling his fur. "Well, darling," she said, "we're one step closer." Hodge stretched, perfectly unimpressed, and padded toward his bowl, a domestic reminder that even murder investigations must pause for supper. "Stop dragging your feet, Doris. The dead don't shuffle," Agatha barked, hauling a trestle table into place with a grunt that suggested considerable martyrdom. Doris, clutching a folded napkin to her chest, said, "I'm doing my best, Mrs. Raisin. I've never played a corpse before." "You're not a corpse. You're Leonard Trent. There's a difference," Agatha said, though in her opinion the differences were mostly technical. The WI hall glowed with evening light and mild alarm. Agatha had borrowed the key and declared an emergency rehearsal. The WI members had obeyed, some out of curiosity, most out of terror. Charles lounged in a chair like a disreputable theatre critic, legs crossed, hands folded behind his head. "You could add music," he suggested. "Something dramatic, a bit of atmosphere." "No one asked you," Agatha snapped. "We are reconstructing a murder, not staging Les Miserables." She pointed at chairs already scraping across the scuffed floor. "Everyone, sit where you sat that night. No dawdling. Memory sharpens when you sit in the correct place." Mrs. Bloxby, serene as ever, guided people into position. "Let's all try to be helpful," she murmured, patting a shoulder here and straightening a napkin there. Doris plopped into Leonard's old seat with such enthusiasm that Agatha winced. "Try not to enjoy it," she muttered. "You're meant to slump, not beam." Fliss hovered near the door, clutching a tray of empty cups, pale and tense. Agatha beckoned sharply. "You'll be demonstrating your coffee route." "Oh," Fliss said weakly. "Must I?" "Yes," Agatha said. "This is an investigation, not amateur hour." The atmosphere crackled with nerves and suppressed glee. The WI adored being useful almost as much as they adored gossip. Agatha seized a wooden spoon and rapped it against a glass. "Right. The evening began with seating confusion because Gloria insisted on being near Leonard." Gloria tossed her hair. "I simply wanted to support the guest of honor." "And be seen doing it," Agatha muttered. "Don't editorialize," Charles said lightly. "You'll bias the witness." "It's fine to bias them if it gets results," Agatha said. "Now, the reserve wine." She positioned herself at the head of the table, mimicking Leonard's pompous stance. He stood here, waffling about terroir, fruity notes and nonsense. Doris leapt up. "Shall I make the noise he made before collapsing?" "No," 3 people cried. Mrs. Bloxby raised a calming hand. "Let's simply follow the order of events." Agatha continued. Everyone clapped. Some people stood. Who stood? Half the room lifted hesitant hands. "That," Agatha said triumphantly, "is the problem. Noise, movement, distraction. In all that chaos, someone could lean over a glass unnoticed." "What about the commotion?" a WI member piped up. when Mrs. Trentham shrieked about something touching her ankle, and everyone started lifting their feet. "Exactly," Agatha said. "A perfect distraction." Charles gave her a sideways grin. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "I'm solving a crime," Agatha corrected. "There's a difference," she pointed at Fliss. "Start from the kitchen door. Walk exactly as you did that night." Fliss obeyed, her tray trembling faintly. She weaved between chairs, apologizing automatically, even though the tray contained nothing. When she reached Leonard's old seat, Doris obligingly slumped sideways. "Stop slumping," Agatha snapped. "You slump later." Fliss halted behind the chair. "I didn't pause," she whispered. "You paused," Agatha said. "You always pause when nervous." Fliss's eyes widened. Mrs. Blocksby stepped in gently. "Perhaps we should focus on actions rather than assumptions." Agatha huffed but relented. "Fine. Continue." Fliss moved on. Several WI members murmured. One said, "She could have done it." Another replied, "So could you, dear. You were flapping about with those flowers." Gloria sniffed. "I adjust floral arrangements with elegance, not poison." Agatha ignored them. "Right. Next. Martin." Martin rose reluctantly from his chair near the back. "I wasn't serving wine at that point." "But earlier you brought over a bottle," Agatha reminded him. "Different bottle," Martin insisted, "and I didn't go near Leonard's glass." "Your memory is questionable," Agatha said. Mrs. Blocksby gave her a reproving look. Mrs. Raisin. All right. Agatha gestured at him. "Show us your route anyway." Martin trudged forward, demonstrating how he had circled the tables. He passed near Leonard's chair, but not within touching distance. "Unless," Agatha said slowly, "someone distracted you." Martin frowned. "No one distracted me. Everyone was too busy fussing over pudding." Agatha made another note. She turned her attention to Jeremy Vale, who lounged near the radiator with the smug air of a man who enjoyed being suspected because it sounded dramatic. "You slipped outside," Agatha said. "For a phone call," Jeremy replied, attempting a posh tone that wavered nervously. "And came back rattled," Agatha pressed. "I was not rattled," Jeremy lied, his left eye ticking. The WI observed him like owls watching a mouse. Agatha pointed to Leonard's chair. "Show us where you sat." Jeremy complied. It placed him 2 seats away, close enough to lean across during a distraction, far enough to deny it convincingly. Agatha paced in a slow circle around the tables. Let's review the critical moment. Leonard stands. People applaud. A candle fiasco erupts. Chairs scrape. Noise rises. Someone steps in. Someone leans over. Someone adds poison. Doris whispered, "Ooh, it's quite thrilling." "Do not enjoy it," Agatha reminded her. The door opened suddenly. Bill entered, coat unbuttoned, expression resigned. "I was told there was an emergency WI meeting." Doris lifted a timid hand. "I may have phoned you." Bill surveyed the tableau, Doris pretending to be dead, chairs arranged like a battlefield, Agatha brandishing the wooden spoon like a scepter. His sigh was monumental. "Agatha," he said, "why?" "Because your investigation is too slow," she retorted. "You're dragging your feet. Someone here murdered Leonard and we're narrowing it down." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "I don't drag my feet." "You toddle," Agatha said. "A gentle toddle." Charles coughed to hide a laugh. Bill stepped forward. "Since you're all here, I might as well share the toxicology. The poison was a common weed killer." Gloria gasped. "Oh, heavens." "Introduced directly into the glass," Bill continued, "not the bottle, and within minutes of Leonard drinking it." Agatha brightened. "Which means—" "It means," Bill interrupted, "that only someone very close to him at the crucial moment could have done it. And before you ask, no, I'm not naming suspects." Agatha folded her arms. "Some of us already have." Bill ignored this. "Continue your reconstruction if you must. But for the love of sanity, don't accuse half the WI." Agatha resumed command. "Right. Everyone move as you did during the applause." Chaos reigned at once. People stood at slightly the wrong times. Someone clapped too early. A spoon fell. A chair scraped. A handbag toppled. Agatha tried to choreograph the noise, but quickly accepted that reality was messy, and so was murder. She circled again, watching Fliss carry the empty tray, watching Gloria fuss over imaginary flowers, watching Jeremy drift too close to Leonard's former seat, watching Martin hover protectively near the bar. And then she saw it, Fliss's expression, frozen, stricken, staring at the empty place setting before Doris's elbows. Her hands shook. Agatha stepped closer. "Fliss?" Fliss jolted, dropping the tray with a clatter. Sorry, I lost my grip." Mrs. Blocksby hurried to her side, guiding her back into a chair. Bill approached, concern flickering. "Are you all right?" Fliss nodded too quickly. "Just tired." Agatha studied her. Guilt pulsed around her like heat. But guilt was a slippery thing. It could mean wrongdoing. It could mean foolishness. It could mean fear of discovery, or even fear of being wrongly blamed. Agatha dismissed everyone before the recriminations could escalate into riot. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Tea was poured. The WI hall exhaled. Bill cornered her as she packed up papers. "Don't go overboard, Agatha." "I never go overboard." "You live overboard," Bill said gently. "Try staying in the boat." He left her with that infuriating wisdom. Charles clicked off the lights as they exited into the corridor. "Well?" "Well," Agatha murmured. "I don't know whether Fliss is hiding murder or stupidity, but either way, she's hiding something." She reached her cottage half an hour later. Hodge met her at the door, tail flicking in royal displeasure. Agatha scooped him up. "There's always one person shaking at the rehearsal," she told him softly. "But is it guilt or nerves?" Hodge yawned magnificently, unconcerned, and padded toward his bowl, a comforting reminder that some mysteries were simple. "Why is she skulking like a burglar?" Agatha muttered, watching Fliss Pemberton hurry across Mercester High Street with the guilty air of someone smuggling crown jewels. Charles, who had accompanied her only because he had nothing better to do, followed Agatha's eyeline. "She's going into the bank. Hardly the stuff of espionage." "People with nothing to hide don't sprint into financial institutions," Agatha said, already marching. "Come on." She swept into the bank with the confidence of a woman who believed doors should part for her. Charles trailed behind, murmuring something about privacy laws, which Agatha ignored. Fliss disappeared into the manager's office. Agatha loitered near a potted plant, pretending to study a brochure entitled Planning for Retirement, though the only retirement she cared about was Bill retiring from lecturing her. Muffled voices carried through the half-closed door. Serious shortfall. Accountability. Personal liability if unrecoverable. Agatha felt a rush of heat. Fliss wasn't merely embarrassed, she was terrified. Terrified people made desperate decisions. The office door opened suddenly. Fliss emerged, pale and trembling, her eyes widening when she saw Agatha. She bobbed her head in a miserable parody of politeness and fled past them. "Well," Agatha said, marching out, "that confirms it." "Confirms what?" Charles asked. "That Leonard was blackmailing her." "You heard nothing about blackmail." "I heard liability. Same thing." Charles gave her a skeptical look. "You're doing that instinct thing again." "It's called intuition," Agatha snapped, "and it's never wrong." He raised both eyebrows. "Never?" She quickened her pace to avoid answering. Later that afternoon, after cornering Mrs. Blocksby under the pretext of offering help with hymn-sheet folding, Agatha coaxed out the missing piece. "Yes, Leonard did write to Fliss," Mrs. Blocksby admitted, smoothing the folded sheets with calm hands. His tone grew, unkind. He insisted further contributions were needed, or questions would be asked. "Questions about who authorized the investments," Agatha said grimly. Mrs. Blocksby nodded. Fliss felt foolish enough already. She didn't want to burden anyone. "She should have told the police," Agatha said. "She was afraid," Mrs. Blocksby replied, "and ashamed." A gentle pause. "I only hope you'll treat her kindly, Mrs. Raisin." Agatha opened her mouth to claim she was always kind, then closed it. Even she couldn't say it with conviction. "She's still a suspect," Agatha muttered. "A strong one." "Many people are strong suspects," Mrs. Blocksby said. "That does not make them murderers." Agatha was unconvinced. That evening, in her cottage, Charles sprawled across her sofa like a decorative nuisance. Hodge occupied the best armchair, fur fluffed in judgment. "Let's consider this rationally," Charles said. "Fliss had motive, certainly. Fear of disgrace, church money missing, a bullying letter from Leonard." "And opportunity," Agatha added. "She moved behind his chair during the coffee service." "Yes, but Gloria had motive too. Her finances are a disaster, and she has fewer inhibitions than a drunken goose." Agatha folded her arms. True, Gloria is perfectly capable of melodramatic homicide. And she had weed killer, Charles pointed out. A whole bottle of it. Agatha frowned. Too obvious. It feels staged. You think someone planted it? I think someone wants her to take the blame, Agatha said. And Gloria, fool that she is obliging them. Charles grinned. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Don't be ridiculous. Murder isn't enjoyable. A beat. Though solving one is immensely satisfying. Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Agatha flung it open. Bill Wong stood there, expression taut with official restraint. Agatha, he said with the tone of a man bracing for impact, I thought I should tell you before you hear it from the WI grapevine. Tell me what? Agatha demanded. We've arrested Gloria Burrows. Agatha stared at him. You've done what? Weed killer matching the toxicology was found in her shed, Bill said, and there were traces of red wine inside the bottleneck. Combined with the argument she had with Leonard, the investment losses and her proximity during the dinner, it forms a clear picture. A picture painted by a 4-year-old with blunt crayons, Agatha shouted. Gloria couldn't poison someone discreetly. She can't even apply lipstick without staining her teeth. Bill sighed. Agatha, please. This is a police matter. So was the last case, she retorted, and the one before that. You remember how those turned out, don't you? We're not incompetent, Bill said, wounded. You're being tidy, Agatha corrected, and tidy is not the same as correct. Charles appeared behind her. Is she shouting at you, Bill? Want me to restrain her? No, Bill said quickly. Restraint never works. Agatha ignored them both. Where exactly was the bottle? In her shed, Bill repeated, behind the gardening tools. Ridiculous, Agatha said. If Gloria wanted to hide evidence, she'd put it in a hat box labelled Christmas decorations. Shed shelves are for people with nothing to hide. Bill rubbed the bridge of his nose. The arrest will hold. The evidence is solid. Or perfectly arranged, Agatha said sharply. Too perfectly. Bill hesitated. That was all the encouragement Agatha needed. She moved closer, lowering her voice. Bill, you know Gloria. She's vain. She's dramatic. She's shallow as a puddle in August. But she couldn't carry off murder. She'd drop the poison, spill the wine, confess halfway through, or faint from the excitement. A reluctant smile tugged at Bill's mouth. You may have a point. Agatha seized the advantage. Someone is letting her take the fall, and you, clever boy, are letting them. Bill stiffened. The case is moving by procedure, that's all. Procedure? Agatha scoffed. The enemy of intuition. Charles raised a hand. I'll drink to that. Bill exhaled. Please don't interfere, Agatha. Of course not, she lied instantly. Bill left looking unconvinced and exhausted. As soon as the door shut, Agatha whirled around. Right, we start over. Charles groaned. Not the seating plan again. Yes, Agatha said fiercely. Everything begins and ends with that wretched seating plan. Who sat where, who moved when, who left the table, who returned, who applauded too loudly, who pretended to adjust the flowers. That's half the WI, Charles said. Then half the WI goes under the microscope, Agatha replied, because if the police think Gloria did it, the real murderer is relaxing somewhere with their feet up. She stalked to her bureau and pulled out the chart she had drawn days earlier, a chaotic mess of stick figures, arrows, and circles that looked like a drunken battle map. She slammed it on the table. Charles peered over her shoulder. This is a crime against stationery. Hush, it's genius in progress. Agatha stared at the diagram, mind whirring. Gloria had been loud and obvious. Martin had been angry. Jeremy had been rattled. Fliss had been terrified. Leonard had been insufferable. But someone clever, had exploited chaos and noise to lean just long enough over one glass. She jabbed the paper with her pen so hard it tore. Someone committed murder under my nose, and now they're hiding behind Gloria's theatricality. Charles refilled his wine. You know, there's a chance Gloria actually did it. Not a chance, Agatha said. Murder requires subtlety. Gloria has the subtlety of a foghorn. The room quieted. Agatha sank into her armchair with a sigh. The exhilaration of the chase was tempered by a growing unease. If the police stopped digging, she would be alone in the hunt, and she was not entirely sure where the hunt should begin next. Hodge leapt onto her lap, kneading with deliberate ownership. Agatha winced as claws pricked her skirt but didn't move him. His warmth steadied her racing thoughts. "Well, darling," she murmured, stroking his head, "it looks like it's just you and me against the world. Again." Hodge settled, purring with absolute indifference, shedding white hairs onto her black skirt, a quiet reminder that even detectives must pay a price for companionship. Agatha glared at the jumble of papers on her table, as though disorder itself were a personal insult. "Hodge, get off," she snapped, tugging a corner of the seating plan now pinned beneath a determined paw. Hodge blinked at her, wholly unrepentant, and sat harder. His tail brushed a line of notes, sending them fluttering down like defeated flags. Agatha seized the nearest sheet before he could flatten that as well. "Honestly, you're no help," she muttered. Hodge stretched luxuriously, rolled once, and settled across the center of everything, the undisputed lord of her investigation. His smugness made her cross, but his warmth was oddly comforting. She pushed his tail aside and tried to restore order. The seating plan was stained with gravy and a mysterious pink smudge. Agatha sniffed it suspiciously. "Probably trifle," she said aloud, resisting the urge to blame Doris for everything sticky. Her eyes narrowed. Something was wrong with the arrangement of cards. She reached for the stack of little folded name tags she had rescued from the hall like relics of a failed coronation. One, smudged and bent, seemed to glare up at her. Leonard Trent, she read. Only the handwriting was unmistakably hers, and she distinctly remembered that the seat it ended up on was meant for Jeremy Vale, before the swap. She frowned, replaying the start of the evening. She had been flustered, proud, convinced the dinner would silence every tedious woman who claimed she lacked refinement. Then Gloria had floated over, fragrant and fluttery, insisting she simply must sit nearer the wine expert. Flattered despite herself, Agatha had switched 2 cards without thought. She dropped heavily into her chair. "So Leonard wasn't meant to sit there," she murmured. "That place was Jeremy's." Hodge, taking this as an invitation, climbed onto her lap, kneading with the enthusiasm of a baker preparing dough. Agatha winced but didn't push him away. Her mind raced. If someone had planned to tamper with wine at that specific seat, the intended victim might have been Jeremy. The thought felt too large for the room. Agatha shoved Hodge aside and stood abruptly. He gave an offended chirp. "Don't look at me like that," she snapped. "You're sitting on evidence." She snatched the place card again. Why had she never questioned its state? If someone had moved it or handled it after the swap, that would matter. She paced, muttering. Jeremy had spent half the dinner outside, answering what he called business emergencies. Everyone assumed he'd been drinking, but Agatha remembered his tight expression, the way he had pushed away his glass untouched. Meanwhile, Leonard had barely made it through his pompous toast before collapsing. If the killer had prepared the glass early, unaware of the seat change, they might have meant to remove Jeremy from their problems, not Leonard. "Unless they noticed the change," she said. "Who actually saw it?" Gloria, clearly. She had prompted it, but Gloria had no subtlety. If she wanted to kill someone, she would have declared it dramatically beforehand. Fliss, however, had the revised plan. She'd been at Agatha's elbow earlier, checking small details, nodding dutifully, anxious to please, and Fliss had moved around the table later with coffee cups and petit fours. Agatha paused mid-step. She could picture it now, Fliss pausing by Leonard, leaning slightly as he made that ghastly joke about church funds, appreciating nicely. Fliss had smiled weakly, put down a saucer, and her hand had hovered close to his glass. No one had looked at her twice. The perfect opportunity. She returned to the table and flipped through her notes. Witness accounts scribbled on napkins, scraps from overheard gossip, a list of who had carried what. The candle incident came back to her. Someone, probably Doris, had knocked a decorative taper too close to a menu, causing a flurry of hands and a burst of laughter. Everyone had turned toward the commotion. A killer would need only seconds. Fliss had seconds, Agatha said, and motive, and pressure, and opportunity. Hodge leapt back onto the table, landing squarely on the seating plan. She tried to shoo him, but he sat stubbornly. "Fine. Sit. I'll work around you." She lifted a note from her Mercester visit earlier that week, Fliss entering a bank, speaking anxiously to a manager. Words like shortfall and liability drifting through the door. Agatha had stood outside, pretending to study an interest rate poster while eavesdropping with the skill of a seasoned spy. Fliss had looked haunted. She had mentioned church funds and recovery in a shaky voice, and Leonard had sent letters. Agatha had seen one at the vicarage, firm, unpleasant, hinting that new investors were essential and that authorizations must withstand scrutiny. A man like him would enjoy holding the moral high ground over a terrified young woman. He'd threatened her pride, her reputation, even her job. Could desperation drive someone like Fliss to poison? Perhaps. But the weed killer in Gloria's shed, that was the thorny bit. The police thought it conclusive. Gloria had been arrested, processed, probably wailing theatrically for sympathy. Agatha wasn't fooled. The evidence had been too neat. Gloria's weed killer bottle had a trace of red wine around the neck. Gloria herself had boasted of tending roses with that poison, but Agatha suspected the bottle hadn't been used for gardening alone. It might have been moved, handled, arranged, planted. Hodge sneezed delicately, spraying a corner of the seating plan. "Thank you," Agatha said flatly. "Very helpful." But the sneeze had jostled another card, revealing a faint smudge on the underside. Coffee? No. The mark was greenish, unusual. She frowned. Leonard's glass had rested on a coaster dusted with white powder, found by Hodge. The weed killer had a similar smell, according to Bill's report, but this card bore no white dust, only a strange smear. It doesn't matter, she decided. The key is motive and access. She tapped the card again. And the seat change. Someone had adjusted their plan, not just acted blindly. Gloria was too scatterbrained, Martin too blunt, Jeremy too panicked by collapsing finances. But Fliss, dutiful Fliss, that kept track of details. She had the revised plan. She knew exactly who sat where. Agatha snatched up the phone. "Bill," she said when he answered, his voice tired, "we need to talk about Fliss." He sighed. "Agatha, we've just arrested Gloria. The evidence is rubbish," Agatha snapped. "It's too obvious, too theatrical. She's not the type. Someone planted that weed killer, Bill. I'm sure of it." There was a pause. She could picture him rubbing his forehead. "What makes you so certain?" "The place cards," she said triumphantly, "and Gloria's request to swap seats, and the fact that Leonard ended up with Jeremy's card, and Fliss had the updated plan." "You're speaking very fast," Bill said carefully. "I'm thinking very fast," Agatha replied. "For once, try and keep up." She explained the theory in brisk, sharp sentences. Bill listened without interrupting, which meant he was taking her seriously. Finally he said, "It's possible. The timing works. The coffee service was close to the poisoning window." "And she was terrified," Agatha added. "She thought she'd ruined the church. Leonard was pressuring her. She could have panicked." "Or someone could have framed her as well," Bill said. "We don't know." Agatha paused. She hadn't considered that. "Well," she said, regaining her firmness, "the only way to find out is to speak to her properly, not gently, not with Mrs. Bloxby hovering like an anxious angel. We need the truth." "We?" Bill asked. "Yes, we," Agatha repeated. "You'll muck it up without me." He exhaled, long-suffering. "Fine. We'll speak to her at the vicarage. Tonight." Agatha hung up and surveyed the chaos around her. Notes everywhere, cards bent and smudged. Hodge sprawled triumphantly in the centre, purring like a tiny engine of self-satisfaction. She sat beside him, exhausted but exhilarated. "You're a menace," she said, stroking his back despite herself. Hodge stretched, claws flexing. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen, its soft hiss filling the quiet room. Agatha allowed herself one small smile. "At least one of us," she murmured, "is having a productive evening." "Don't hover, Agatha," Charles murmured as they stepped into the vicarage drawing-room. "You look like you're preparing for an execution." "I am," Agatha hissed back. "I just don't know whose." Mrs. Bloxby rose from her seat with her usual quiet dignity, though her eyes betrayed strain. "Thank you for coming, both of you. Fliss is upstairs composing herself." Her voice remained mild, but the words held gentle steel. "Please remember she has been under considerable pressure." Agatha bristled at the implication she might pounce like an alley cat. Bill Wong, standing by the mantelpiece, lifted an eyebrow at her, just enough to remind her she had indeed pounced several times in the past week alone. She ignored him and chose a chair with the air of someone claiming ground. The room was small and slightly shabby in the comforting vicarage way. Threadbare cushions, a crocheted throw, a fire that needed poking. The scent of baking drifted faintly from the kitchen, scones perhaps, or Mrs. Bloxby's quiet attempt to brace herself. Fliss entered like a ghost of tidy anxieties, pale, rigid, her hands knotted in front of her. She greeted no one, only sat beside her aunt and stared at her lap. Bill cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming, Miss Pemberton. We appreciate your cooperation." Fliss nodded without looking up. Agatha, unusually gentle, leaned forward. "We aren't here to bully you. We're here because something doesn't add up, and I think you know what it is." Fliss flinched. Mrs. Bloxby placed a hand atop her niece's. "Just listen first, dear." Agatha unfolded her notes with uncharacteristic care. "Let's go through this plainly. You handled the vicarage accounts. Leonard convinced you to invest church funds in one of his so-called partnerships. When the money didn't show up, he sent you increasingly sharp letters. He implied your name, your reputation, perhaps even Mrs. Bloxby's would be questioned." Fliss swallowed. "There was the dinner," Agatha continued. "You moved behind the chairs with the coffee tray. Leonard made that dreadful joke about church funds appreciating nicely. You paused just long enough to speak to him, and you were one of the few people who had the revised seating plan after Gloria begged me to rearrange the place cards. You knew Leonard had swapped places with Jeremy." "That's conjecture," Bill said carefully, though his tone lacked conviction. "It's common sense," Agatha shot back. Fliss knew exactly who sat where. She had every reason to pay attention. Mrs. Bloxby squeezed her niece's hand. "Fliss, my dear, if there is anything you wish to say, now is the time." The ticking clock grew painfully loud. Fliss's voice, when it came, sounded like paper tearing. "I didn't mean to kill him." Agatha exhaled, not triumphantly, but with bleak inevitability. Mrs. Bloxby closed her eyes briefly, then opened them, steady again. "Tell the truth, sweetheart." Fliss nodded, shaking. "I was terrified. Leonard said he would have to be honest about the state of things, that the vicar would ask questions, that I might be viewed as having acted irresponsibly. Or worse, I thought I'd ruined everything. Aunt Margaret works so hard. The parish trusts her. I couldn't bear—" her voice cracked. "I couldn't bear being the cause of scandal." Bill softened. "Go on." "I didn't sleep for days. Every letter Leonard sent was worse. He insisted I find new investors. I tried to explain we didn't have any. He said that wasn't his problem." She wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. "When the dinner came, I hoped he would be civil, maybe explain everything. He just smiled and said he might tidy up the accounts in a way that didn't reflect well on me." Agatha felt a twist of fury on Fliss's behalf. "He enjoyed the power." "Yes," Fliss whispered, "and I panicked. I had weed killer at home for the garden. I thought a little would make him ill. I thought a little would make him ill. Nothing worse. I took a small bottle in my apron." She covered her face. "I only meant to scare him, or slow him down. I thought he'd drink a little, feel unwell, and the whole awful business would stop spiralling." Bill's tone stayed gentle but firm. "How did you do it, Fliss?" "During the toast," she said, voice trembling. Everyone laughed at something he'd said. I walked behind him with the coffee tray. My hand shook. I spilled. I thought no one saw. It was only a splash." Agatha closed her notes. There was no satisfaction in being right. Mrs. Bloxby sat straighter, her voice calm, though her eyes shone. "And afterwards, the weed killer found in Gloria's shed." Fliss looked ill. I panicked again. Gloria had argued with Leonard. Everyone knew. She's vain and loud, and I thought suspicion would fall there naturally. I hid the bottle in her shed late that night. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do." Silence pooled in the room, heavy and inevitable. Mrs. Bloxby spoke first. "Thank you for telling the truth, Fliss." She smoothed her niece's hair with slow, steady strokes. "Whatever happens now, honesty was needed." Fliss wept soundlessly. Bill's expression held no triumph, only sadness. "I'll inform the superintendent. I'll make sure your cooperation is noted. Your previous good character will matter." Charles, who had been leaning elegantly against a bookcase, finally spoke. "If I may offer a reflection—" "No," Agatha snapped. He ignored her. "Nothing is quite so dangerous," he pronounced, "as moral vanity in a cardigan." Agatha glared. Mrs. Bloxby gave a small, weary laugh despite everything. Even Fliss managed a hollow smile. Bill stood. "I'll handle the formalities. Agatha, thank you for the insight." His voice grew wry. As usual. Agatha pretended not to preen. 3 weeks later, Carsley exhaled its drama with typical village efficiency. Scandal softened to whispers, then to mild tutting, then to silence devoted mostly to gardening tips. The church funds crisis was partially resolved. Insurance covered some of the loss, and Charles, with the air of a man bestowing royal favour, made a discreet donation. The WI solemnly banned gourmet dinners for the foreseeable future. Agatha's cottage felt unusually peaceful. She sat in her armchair, half-heartedly knitting something vague and lumpy. Hodge occupied the opposite chair like a retired colonel, tail curled neatly over his paws. Agatha paused in her attempt at a rib stitch and studied him. "You're judging my knitting," she said accusingly. Hodge blinked. He judged everything. Outside drifted the soft hum of Carsley life. A lawnmower somewhere, distant chatter, the low rumble of a tractor. After weeks of interviews, theories, confessions, and indignities, the quiet felt almost foreign. Agatha laid the knitting aside. "Well," she said aloud, "that's that." Yet it didn't feel like that. Closing a case always left a faint ache, the sudden lack of purpose after being fueled by curiosity, indignation, and the fundamental joy of proving herself cleverer than everyone else. She lit a cigarette before remembering her resolution not to smoke indoors. Hodge shot her a withering look. "Oh, hush," Agatha muttered. "Everybody's a critic." She rose to open a window, letting in a mild breeze and the faint scent of roses from Mrs. Bloxby's garden. She wondered how her friend truly fared. Mrs. Bloxby had carried herself with grace, but the strain of Fliss's confession must have cut deeply. Agatha made a mental note to bring her scones, though she would of course buy them rather than attempt baking. Returning to her chair, she stretched her legs. Leonard Trent, she mused. Imagine causing chaos even in death. It had been a tragedy of small human proportions, the kind MC Beaton might have gently skewered. Pride, fear, vanity, dread of embarrassment. No grand villainy, just an ordinary girl drowning in responsibility. And Agatha, as usual, in the centre of the storm she swore she never sought. The phone rang. Hodge leapt, startled. Agatha groaned, but secretly she felt the familiar spark of anticipation. She snatched the receiver. "Yes?" "Agatha, dear," came Mrs. Bloxby's warm voice. "You haven't heard about the business with Mrs. Timm's compost heap, have you? It's quite shocking." A slow smile spread across Agatha's face. "No," she said, "but I suspect I'm about to." Hodge settled again, tail flicking approvingly as if to say the world was back in proper working order. Agatha leaned back, listening to Mrs. Bloxby's tale of minor scandal with growing delight, and the comfortable certainty that wherever foolish hearts and dubious schemes gathered, she would have work to do, and she would never, ever be bored again.